Hello, I'm Dave Rogers, and welcome to my studio here in Morro Bay, California. You know, variegated washes are one of the most beautiful and vibrant ways to add life to your watercolor paintings. Whether you're painting skies, water, or landscapes, knowing how to blend colors smoothly can really take your work to the next level. In this video, I'll show you exactly what a variegated wash is and how to create one step by step. Then you'll see the technique in action in a live workshop excerpt from the California Lighthouse Watercolor Mastery Workshop. So grab your brushes and let's get started. So the brush I'll be using for the first part of this demonstration is a number 12 round synthetic. And the color palette is raw sienna, burnt sienna, hooker's green, and cobalt blue. So this will be a demonstration of a variegated wash, but we're going to start with simple shapes. A variegated wash is a watercolor technique where two or more colors blend seamlessly on a paper, creating a soft, natural transition from one hue to another. And what I'll be showing you here today is basically the same color palette that we have for the California Lighthouse demonstration that I'll be showing you here in a few minutes. Now, there are different ways of creating a variegated wash. This is actually the wet on dry method. And the benefit of the wet on dry method is that you really maintain the color intensity of all of the individual colors that are in the wash. And the best way to do that is to lay down the color like you see me doing here, and then connect the edges where the colors come together. And the advantage to this is that each color maintains its individual color intensity, but you still get those beautiful blended edges. Let's create a few more shapes to that. Now, there are a number of different ways to create a variegated wash, and this is just one of them. The one that you probably see most of the time is the wet on wet method, and that method is actually perfect for creating things like skies and water and things like that. But this wet on dry method, which is what I'll be using in the California Lighthouse workshop demonstration here in a few minutes, really works great for landscapes that have a lot of color. And what you want to have in a landscape are these natural color transitions. And the wet on dry technique really allows for that. Now, this is a fairly limited palette, but you can see how easy it is to go from one shape to another. As long as this wash is wet, there are a number of different things that you can do to it to modify it. Now, if your board is tilted as it should be to about a 20-degree angle, you're going to get some water and pigment that will collect at the bottom of the shape. And the way that you take care of that is just by squeezing some of the moisture out of your brush and just picking it up at the bottom of the shape. Now we'll just complete this shape with a little bit of yellow over here on the end. And again, exactly the same process. We're just adding the shape first. And then once we have the shape, we can connect that shape to the other pigment with a simple brush stroke. Now, as with all watercolor techniques, timing really is everything. Even more so with the wet on dry variegated wash. As long as the wash is wet, you're going to have a window of opportunity to work in. And what that means basically is that you can manipulate this wash and you can make it darker, or you can make it even more varied with a little bit more pigment. Remember when you're adding paint that the paint that you add should be a little bit heavier consistency than the paint that you already have on the paper. That way you know that the paint is not going to move around too much, especially if you're trying to create effects that are, if you want an area to be darker. Now, that being said, if you add the pigment a little bit late in the process, the pigment may tend to want to stay in one place. I mean, you'll still get the soft edges like I'm getting here, but the pigment doesn't necessarily want to move around as much as it did before because of the fact that the paper's beginning to dry out. But there's also fixes for that, and you can actually use a spray bottle to help move that pigment around a little bit more. Spray bottle can be hugely beneficial when you're using this technique because it really helps to encourage the blending, soften edges, and slow down the drying process. So what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you how you can make changes to your initial variegated wet on dry wash. And whenever you're making a change, you're always going to get additional water that's going to collect at the bottom of that wash. So you'll want to pick up all of the excess with a dry brush, which is what I'm also doing here. And what I'll do now is I'll just spray this with just a little shot of water, and you can really see how that paint is going to begin to spread out, and it's going to really soften those edges and really encourage what hasn't already blended to blend even a little bit more. If there are any hard edges, it'll soften them out, and it's really, I mean, you'll see it here where the paint is really dark. It's really going to begin to blend into its surroundings and really soften up some of those edges. So very, very useful tool when you're creating a wet on dry variegated wash to help move things along. Let's see how this technique is used in a real painting situation. In this next clip from my California Lighthouse Watercolor Mastery Workshop, you'll see how variegated washes help create depth and atmosphere in a coastal scene. We're going to begin to move over here to the left-hand side, and a lot of this area right in here, a lot of this foreground area, a lot of this color over here and this in the cliff side, a lot of that is going to be painted all at the same time. Okay, and it's going to be a lot of it is going to be like this that we have up here in this variegated wash, but it's going to be a completely different technique. Okay, it's going to be a variegated wash, but it's going to be a wet on dry variegated wash. Why? Because we want to have some really intense color going on here. I mean, look at the difference. Look at the difference between the saturation of the color and the intensity of the color that you have going on down here and over here compared to what we have going on over here. Okay, big difference, right? Why? Completely different technique. This is wet on wet. We started with the wet paper and used tea consistency paint. This over here is going to be much thicker consistency paint, and it's going to be wet on dry. And we're just going to, as we move from one color to the next, moving around here around the cliffside, we're going to allow those colors to come together and mingle and do whatever they want to do. Okay, that's going to be the fun of it. We're just going to let it happen. Okay, we're just going to let it happen. The main thing that we want to focus on here is whenever you create this type of a wash, the main thing that we want to do, we want to concentrate on what are the dominant colors in these areas of the painting. Okay, now down here, obviously we've got this nice big dominant green, and over here we got kind of a dominant burnt sienna. All right, and over here is kind of a mix, right? Most of this down here is all going to be just like a one-step process. I'm going to start with my dominant green, okay? And I'm always remembering, excuse me, always remembering that I've got just this narrow window to work with, right? It's a narrow window. So while that's wet, rinse out my brush, grab some of my raw sienna, and just like I showed you in the demonstration, I'm just going to paint right along that edge with that raw sienna, allowing those two to mix together and do their thing. Okay? Let them mix. Let them do whatever they want to do. If you got some extra paint, and you probably will, just pick it up. Pick up your painting and let those colors roll around and do whatever they want to do. You want some mixing going on there. Okay. Now what? Well, I'm going to switch gears again. Maybe we want some burnt sienna right in here. Maybe that burnt sienna goes right up here to the edge. And where we touch that other wash, not with your finger, where we touch that other wash, those colors are going to mingle. They're going to come together. Okay? They're going to come together. Maybe we want to, as we're painting, as we're moving up around the hill here, maybe we want to add a little bit more green, right? Maybe we want to add a little bit of green to that. Maybe we put a little bit of green here. Be careful not to paint through your buildings. Don't paint through your buildings. And don't worry too much about this darkest green up here. We're gonna handle that in a completely different wash. Okay, that's gonna get handled in a completely different wash. But as you move around and you get to this other side up here, now we want to get back to that base color of yellow or raw sienna, because that is going to be the base color for our cliff on the other side. Okay, remember the cliff, we want to paint that cliff with probably, I would say probably at least 2, possibly 3 washes, successive washes. So we're going to need a base color to work with, and that's going to be that yellowish raw sienna. Okay. Now, you remember me saying you've got this window, right? You've got this window of opportunity. Everything is wet right now. It's the perfect opportunity to adjust some of these washes if you want to. Does the saturation, does it look right to you? Or could it stand to be a little bit darker perhaps? Or more saturated with color? To me, I think this needs to be just a little bit more saturated with a little bit more green. So I've got the opportunity, the window of opportunity to make that happen right now. Why not take advantage of it? This could be a little bit redder right in here. Take advantage of the opportunity, guys. If you want it deep and rich and colorful, take the time, take advantage of the opportunity to do that. Now, every time that you do this, you remember me saying, every time you do it, you hear me say it a lot, it's going to come out different. Every time it comes out different. We're just going to let that dry, let that do its thing. Again, you don't want to wait too long. I mean, if you're still thinking about darkening some of these areas up, you can really, you can really get some good, juicy, vibrant transitions in here by just adding a little bit thicker pigment. Okay, just a little bit thicker pigment is what really what it takes. And what I'm talking about is moving from the and this is totally optional. Totally optional. If you want to do this, fine. If not, that's okay too. But I'm giving you the option for those of you that feel like you want to maybe you want a little bit more oomph to the color that you have going on here. All right. Maybe you're adding just a little bit more pigment to the paint, and just be careful that you're still within that window of opportunity, because if you're not careful, very good chance that you could create a background, okay, or a bloom, or whatever you want to call it. All right, just be careful. But take advantage of that window. Take advantage of that window of opportunity to be able to do that if you are so inclined. But the way to darken up that pigment is just by adding the same exact version of what you've got going on over here with your pigment, same version, just thicker, just less water. That's all it is. More saturation means less water. That's all it is. More saturation means less water. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Variegated washes can add so much depth and movement to your watercolor paintings. And I really hope that this demo gave you some new ideas to try in your own work. If you'd like to see how this technique is used in a full landscape painting, be sure to check out the California Lighthouse Watercolor Mastery Workshop, and there's a link for that right down in the description below. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.